California is talking about putting together a wealth tax for the state's richest business owners and citizens. And before we get into some debate, we need to ask ourselves really one question: has this worked before, and where? Well, two places that this has been instituted is in France and Norway, two countries at a much lower percentage of the billionaires' overall wealth or assets, 2% and 1.1%. California wants 5% of the billionaires' overall wealth. Well, ultimately, it did not really work in those places. One country decided to scrap the deal altogether. The other country just never really saw the return. So, is this something that California can deal with, and is it worth it?
The proposed wealth tax on California billionaires sparking a high stakes debate over inequality in the state's innovation economy. One Democrat speaking out against the proposed measure joins us right now, San Jose Mayor Matt Mahan. Good morning to you. We've been having this debate, and it's been playing out not just in your own state, but in some ways across the country. We've had a number of folks from Silicon Valley on our broadcast, and of course, there's a debate going on in your state. Why don't we start with just explaining your position on this? And I'm very curious not only about your own position, but how you think about your position as it relates to some of the more progressive players in the state right now.
Sure. Was the mayor of the largest city in Silicon Valley. I'm deeply concerned by a proposal that is coming from a place of genuine concern about economic inequality. That's a real issue. It's an issue that deserves serious response. I don't think that our political leaders at a federal level have done enough to address economic inequality, but I think there are better alternatives, other ways of closing tax loopholes and generating revenue and leveling the playing field for folks. I'm worried that the unintended consequences of this proposed wealth tax could be devastating for our innovation economy here in Silicon Valley, the state's finances. Ironically, I think this may ultimately push the burden onto working and middle-class families as this proposed tax generates capital flight. We're already seeing that.
What do you think the chances are that it actually passes?
Let's kind of scale back a little bit and talk about what he just said there. And in my opinion, he's absolutely right. With everything that's going on in the news in California today, proposing a new money system, which I'm sure he's going to talk about in a second, of ways to generate revenue, where we know that a lot of the revenue of California is lost and gone, or in some case stolen. And again, we don't know anything until these things come to light, but it's always seems to be some type of band-aid placed on the citizens of California because of an ineptitude of policies that are being made by Sacramento. And I was just thinking about why this is all of a sudden the solution, because I was actually at a grocery store the other day ago, and a gentleman, I'm a resident of California, so a gentleman was at the grocery store. He said, sign the wealth tax, tax the billionaires, and it's always this, the blame on somebody else instead of looking at the real cause of the root problem. Now, the problem with taxing billionaires, as we just talked about, is they're going to leave, right? Larry Page, gone. Peter Thiel, gone. That's Google and PayPal. Two of probably hundreds of billionaires here in California, right? They started these businesses in Silicon Valley. They want to be here, but California is not making it favorable. And with that, what happens is overall job loss is going to come next, because if the companies are moving headquarters, which I already know for sure, Google is leaving to Texas. I'm pretty sure PayPal is going to do the same thing. Then now you have a lack of jobs, right? And so it's not really a win-win for everyone, right? If wealth tax is being instituted here in California, employers leave the state, and then where does that money get, or that tax get passed on to? It has to be at the regular people level, right? Let's just speak plain English, right? Common sense says is like is if this is the tax that once was for the billionaires, they want to raise. By the way, $100 billion. Okay. And again, what do they want to raise it for? They want to raise it for Medicare. Well, here's a stat that you may or may not know. Medicare loses $60 billion annually, like gone, lost. And again, as I've always asked these questions on the show, is like, where does this money go if it doesn't go to the things that we're supposed to pay for, right? And if we look at those other two countries that's tried to do this before, then and if they've had failing results, then why would this even be a proposal? So right now, California needs, believe, needs to get about 875,000 votes or signatures to even make this a proposal in California's legislation. And I hope it doesn't. Personally, I hope it doesn't because this is just another band aid. But you guys can let me know what you think in the comments.
I think it can be defeated because at the end of the day, Californians have common sense. And when they hear the arguments and understand the potential implications, I think it won't pass, but the damage is already being done. We've seen multiple billionaires, job creators, including Larry Page, the co-founder of one of California's most iconic companies, leave the state. This is going to have long-term consequences, and it's a problem. It's ironically, Silicon Valley is a model for economic mobility, upward mobility, and opportunity. My dad was a letter carrier, and I came here and worked in the tech industry myself, and that's how I broke into the middle class in many ways. And so I think that the unintended consequences of this misguided proposal could be devastating for the state and its working and middle class families.
Every year, there are so many proposals that get um, passed in legislation. And I think a lot of the times, most Californians don't really know where they are. I hope for once people are starting to look at some of these measures that are being proposed because unintended consequences are always coming back to the everyday, middle class American. And at the end of the day, we end up suffering. And then the things that we pay for don't get paid, don't get the things that we pay for don't actually happen, right? I mean, yes, we want to fix Medicare. We want to make sure people have health insurance, but we know that there is a a funnel of money that isn't getting to the place it needs to go, right? And so before we do any of that, we have to fix the real problem, right? We have to fix and remember, California is dealing with I want to say a 16 trillion billion dollar, not trillion, ooh, that'd be crazy. $16 billion deficit. So really, California isn't really making any money. We're just on borrowed time at this point, right? Um, and I know people go around and say, hey, we got the greatest economy and blah, 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 this and that. Well, if you look around to the everyday person, just regular people, it doesn't seem like that. That's not what is really being advertised as a citizen here in the state to this people. It doesn't feel like the economy is going forward. Matter of fact, for a lot of times, it feels like it's going backwards, right? And the wealth tax again sounds good. Most people say, yeah, the billionaires should pay, their fair share. And I agree, they should. But they probably do it with all other types of taxes, especially when they have businesses here in California, which for sure get taxed. So now you're just talking about taking money out of their pocket, their personal pockets, like their assets. But the real damage is going to happen when those people leave, right? We're already seeing companies just like exit stage left in California, left and right. So, in summary, I don't think this is the solution, right? I think there's already a ton of money being spent in California, and I don't think the money is getting to where it needs to go. And that has to be the first thing that has to happen. If we're, it's like, going to surgery, right? You just don't patch it up and say, hey, go to therapy, when you have a broken foot or arm, right? You have to actually repair the thing that's broken, and then you can start to institute new measures, right? New procedures. But California is bleeding money every single year. $60 billion on Medicaid I mean, it'll be every year there'll be a new tax, and then ultimately there won't be any billionaires left, right, in the state of California. And then who they're going to come knocking on the door? To the people who paid a lot of taxes here, most in the country, by the way, and then nothing ever gets done. So, just another California story that we get to talk about. But what do you think, right? Do you think this is a fair? The billionaires need to pay their fair share. I mean, yeah, we will all love for them to pay their fair share. I know that's right. But again, if it's at the cost of losing jobs and wages and no economic growth, remember, jobs bring economic growth. That's how people go out there and pay for things. So I think we have to revisit this whole situation. Well, let me know what you think in the comments. Like and subscribe. This is Saving America's Money. Remember, stay strong, stay safe, and continue to save America's money. Peace.